Sylvia, I'll start with you. Just a quick intro on what you've been up to.
So yes, Sylvia Broadley, Birmingham City Council. My role is as Energy Specialist Manager for the Council, and I'm leading on the Hydrogen Plus rollout and the collaboration with ITM on the right bus. Also leading on the rollout of EV infrastructure across the city as well.
James.
Good afternoon. James Cross, Motive Fuels. We operate 7 hydrogen refuelling stations across the UK, including the station in Birmingham, which we're going to discuss today, which plug-in is the largest combined production and refuelling station in Europe, to my knowledge, for green hydrogen. And just to address the point about ITM that Sylvia mentioned, Motive Fuels until March we were ITM Motive, so the change of name represents a spin-off from ITM. We're now 50% owned by ITM, 50% by VTOL, and that's really about giving us quite significant investments and targeted business around refueling specifically. So Motive Fuels formula is ITM Motive, just to confuse everybody for missing that.
And Robert,
I'm Robert Bess, I'm the Engineering Director at Brightbus. So we have, as we mentioned, just over 100 fuel cell vehicles in operation at the minute, including some in Birmingham, some in Aberdeen, and some in Belfast, as well as Dublin. So we built our first electric bus in '98, and then from there moved that on to our first hydrogen fuel cell buses in 2006. And by the end of this year, we'll have our full range of vehicles be available in both battery electric and fuel cell. So we've been quite well poised to answer the questions on battery versus hydrogen, and it's quite an interesting discussion point. So I look forward to this debate. Thanks.
well, I hope it's not going to be too much of a debate. Preaching to the converted mostly here. But, Sylvia, I'll start with you. Not to put too much pressure on after Ben said it would be good to have a successful project to talk about soon, but what's it like been running this pioneering project?
Well, it's been emotional. I think it's helpful to put a perspective on this in terms of the timeline. Our journey actually started in 2015, and that kicked off with actually, from a city point of view, looking at a refuelling infrastructure perspective of how you get to low and zero carbon. And since then, it's been getting the funding in, which started to come into place from about 2017, right through to 2019. So for a local authority taking up that challenge, and it has been noted in the previous discussion about the role of local authorities in creating demand. Yes, that is actually possible, but there is a timeline, there's a reality in terms of getting funding in, it's the governance and the procurement actually around that. So in terms of pioneering, it's no one person, it's a whole collection of people in terms of the legal side, the finance side, also the partnership collaborations through the procurement processes, so working with Motive and with Brightbus as well. And also, that whole period that we had, which were about the contractual arrangements, because this is buses for a bus operator. They, for National Express, they're keeping their buses 8 to 10 years. Other bus operators maybe up to 20 years. This is a long-term investment, and therefore those relationships that you're creating contracts around are long-term. So, that in terms of pioneering, actually, it felt like struggling through mud at times in getting those basics, getting the baseline actually right as well. And other things that have actually been challenging is that level of understanding of what needs to be in place from actually getting your depot arrangements with your bus operator actually being upgraded. That is a cost in itself, and there's a level of expertise that's actually required. And where we are rolling out 20 buses, the first step, you can't just put 20 buses out. there is a whole period in terms of driver training, maintenance staff training, and actually looking at performance efficiencies actually for the bus. So there is a whole range of development to get to a point where you can start to put the buses out commercially. So our timeline, commerciality, actually starts early September. We're in a phase where we are still pioneering, so to speak, in putting all those operational requirements in place.
James, how is the green hydrogen production performing today?
So I think first I wanted to echo Sylvia's point about the amount of effort that goes into one of these projects before it's made goes into the ground. So we sort of heard our scale earlier with the larger scale that site learning represents, that comes with increased environmental permitting, increased grid connections, increased data flows, all of which pushes out the time of the site. In terms of how it's operating, we've had cars refilling for over a year now. We had our first buses refill at the very end of last year, but we are still commissioning, so we haven't yet hit that point of any stable projects that can point us to success. So the other thing to bear in mind with this site is it's a network of components in our green hydrogen production, which actually has been really, really reliable since we first started. We've had any outages due to hydrogen production through compression, through storage. We heard about the car refueling protocol. That comes with the requirement to chill the gas down to -40. It's a little bit excessive apart from where today is 11. But that, operationally, that's a challenge. And it's ridiculous that one of the least reliable components on the site is actually that cooling gas. So in terms of the buses, again, there's a conversation there where bus refuels are not cooled, gas isn't cooled. And what that means is we can get refueling down to about 10 minutes, but you need sensation, and that's what we're in the process of doing at the moment. But we can't get any further than that because of the temperature in the tank. So there's a real trade-off there around complexity of the site, reliability of the site, which is challenged by cooling versus refueling time and what the operator needs. So that's one of the key bits of work for us is how do you address that? Do you make cooling something you can retrofit, which is the appropriate thing? Or do you take the pain up front and cool and then see potential operational issues on some of the other sites that you can observe? Longer than answer today.
No, that's good, thank you. And Rob, how in terms of the fit out of these buses with fuel cells, and what have been the challenges in getting them in the first place, and how have they been performing operationally?
Well, I think the first thing to say about a fuel cell bus is it isn't particularly complicated. Whenever you've been building buses for a long time, all of the components themselves have been well proven out over the years, both in bus and in different applications. So really the challenge is integrating them together, which really is what companies like Wrightbus have been doing for a very long time with different products. And obviously once they're integrated together, then you do have a learning curve, as you have with any new product. So far we're being quite pleased with how well things are going from that point of view. Certainly from a performance side, I was looking at some numbers yesterday from our fleet in Aberdeen, and comfortably those vehicles could achieve just under 300 miles in their current applications without really stressing themselves overly, which is significantly better than what any of our EV fleet can do. So you can really see straight away an obvious advantage before getting into all of the other benefits. And from a reliability point of view, the actual fuel cell systems have been very impressive. That's at the tank side. So really, we have no real concerns long term with that. Obviously, we'll be doing new versions and new improvements to gradually improve the vehicles. But I think the future is very bright from that point of view, from the vehicle side. And they're really the only barrier that we see going forward is the availability of hydrogen. Once that question is resolved, once volume uptake happens, then prices will continue to come down, and we can really see mass adoption.
It's really good to hear that positive comparison to the battery electric. So it's good to see the real life performance. Sylvia, could you talk to us about how important was the council's clean air hydrogen bus pilot, has been to kickstart the hydrogen market for zero emission fuels.
Well, it's been very important. It basically supports this whole operational process that I've just explained. It's running alongside it in terms of getting to establishing the operational and the commercial viability requirements actually for operating buses for a bus operator. And that goes from, as I mentioned, performance efficiencies, and specific to that are things like the speed of actual refuel. It's actually the time from the depot to the refueling station as part of that. And through this programme, and I said we'll get to full commercial operation by early September, but it's absolutely clear that there is a requirement not only for the public refueling station, but actually that it's balanced with a back-to-base model as well. And some of that aligns with, from an operator's point of view, is actually what routes are they operating. So what you don't want is dead mileage and driver time going from your depot to your refueling infrastructure and then going back to your route. All of those things have to actually be aligned, and I'm sure any vehicle operator will be looking at how they minimise the amount of dead mileage that their drivers are actually doing. So in working those things out, and actually how long it takes to refuel a bus. So, from where we are now to where we need to be, yes, there is a gap. It will get better when we look at what Aberdeen are doing in terms of Brewster. They started to nail those times that, before this, that it's not where we want to be as compared to refueling diesel buses. So, for a bus operator, price is everything. The cost is everything, and where things are at the moment in terms of the total cost of ownership, it's not there at the moment. But when you look at your operational requirements, from your staff element to your maintenance and servicing and all those elements there, it's making sure they're all aligned. What we have found with this programme, it has kick-started that catalyst to go for the Zebra funding. And as was mentioned, yes, there is funding there for the next 124 buses, 100 of which will be double-deck buses, and 24 will be rapid transit vehicles, which are mostly 18-metre vehicles. But that programme will be looking at the support and the learning actually from the Clean Air bus pilot in terms of where refueling infrastructure actually needs to be, what the training requirements of staff both on the driver side but also on the maintenance side as well.
Thanks. And that's the leads nicely to I'll ask of Robert Jato is from this particular project, how far can you take the refueling infrastructure and the fuel cell electric buses based on the learnings and the encouraging results so far?
A long way, I think, is the short answer. We have roughly a ton, slightly over a ton a day capacity to use hydrogen and burn. The buses that are there now are committed to take 400 kilos of that, so have capacity in burning for applications now. In terms of motorsport, our ambition is to use this as a template for stations going forward, and we're very actively trying to identify that sweet spot where you have a site, a good connection, crucially the vehicles, to bring those together, to build out the sites, and really that's what we're focusing on, is identifying those areas to take the template that is Birmingham with its redundancy, 2 sets of electric motors, 2 sets of compressors, or picture of what we think is a minimum large scale, and take on. It's finding elements together in one place. It's a very challenge to use it.
I think I agree, I think we can take this a very long way, and I think for me probably the most interesting point, this is something I've been making for a while, but it's been accentuated massively by what we're seeing in Ukraine at the minute. If you look at the common parts between an electric bus and a fuel cell bus, they're basically the same thing, except one has a very large battery and the other one has a hydrogen fuel cell, has a tank valve pipework network. So if you want to get cost out and reduce the price of the battery electric bus, there's really only one component you can focus on heavily, which is the battery pack. So the whole future trends around battery pricing are all built around pricing continuing to go down. And I've always been sceptical of that, considering when you see how far through the development curve battery technology already is. And we're seeing at the minute significant trends across the world in battery prices increasing, not decreasing, which won't work with too many of the academic models that we're looking at previously. And it's very interesting to try to predict battery prices going forward at the minute. There's certainly not many people who are going to put their house on what battery prices is going to do. Whereas you compare that to the fuel cell and the tank system, and really 95+% of those components are really volume driven. So that we collectively come up with through industry, through government strategies, if we increase the volume across the board, then pricing will only go one way for those components. So I think it's the biggest single reason from an economic point of view that we should work together, we should form these partnerships, and we should drive volume, because that's how we're going to get the price right. That's the only way I see that we'll get the price right on the vehicle side. And I think that will happen, but the big piece that needs to happen alongside that is the refueling side, improving that, more orders there so that the technology can continue to develop, and then the gas availability through that, and getting the price of the gas right. And then that's where the hydrogen economy springboards from, and that's how we get mass adoption.
Thank you very much. We'll open up to the floor now. Do we have any questions for our panelists? No? While you're thinking, oh, here we go, we've got one towards the back.
Yeah. From Racy, University of Kent. So my question is more on the operational side regarding the deadlines of buses that you mentioned. So I know that normally we see buses that are having very few passengers on them, and now we are talking about the precious hydrogen that we are producing in China. Have you done any analytics towards your bus timetables to reduce some of the service on those hydrogen buses? Of course, this is a more general comment on normal services of buses, but when it comes to hydrogen, we become more conscious with deadlines maybe. And I was thinking maybe looking at the timetable, I know there are some things about the timetable that cannot be touched, but there is definitely room for reducing those deadlines if you look back at the timetable and looking at the historical data of bus route users. Really.
So our bus operator, National Express, is very highly digitised in terms of all the information that they collate to look at not only bus performance but also in terms of their scheduling as well. So there is ongoing analysis through National Express as a matter of course. I think that there are a number of elements here. Cities are introducing clean air zones. They have targets in terms of net zero, and where measurement that starts to prioritise where key areas are actually are to do with air quality particularly. So for Birmingham, there were specific routes that we were looking at targeting zero emission buses. Alongside that as well is our transport policy, which is a 25-year transport policy, which is actually about shifting people from their private vehicles actually onto public transport. And COVID to one side, bus passengers were actually increasing in Birmingham prior to COVID, and now they're gradually picking up again. Our targets in terms of modal shift is 40% to enable the city to start to reach those net zero targets. And even by 2030, we will not have reached net zero. So that just shows the scale of the problem that we currently have. So in looking at those dynamics of where refuelling should actually be, as I mentioned, it's a split between what you need at your base and what will be part of a shared infrastructure, bearing in mind we're trying to get to this 40% modal shift. We're trying to get to net zero public transport. We're trying to encourage the transition of other types of vehicles, whether that is other types of heavy vehicles, but also passenger vehicles as well, to net zero as well. And hydrogen is part of that whole makeup. So it's an element of both, but it's recognising also the operational requirements actually of bus operators. When they do maintenance on buses or services on buses, they have to vent all the hydrogen out of the vehicle before they actually work on it. You can't then get to your hydrogen refuelling station. You have to have some kind of backup element, either at or very near to the base that you're at. And in terms of bus operations in cities like Birmingham, they tended in the past to be very city centre focused in terms of where their depots are. So if you traditionally look at where our depots are, they're literally just dotted around the city centre. That is no longer the case. They're now moving out to the outside of the city. Part of the fact because there's a lot of developments going on in the city. As you know, we've got the new high-speed rail actually happening. There's a huge amount of regeneration actually happening in the city centre. So land values are astronomical. That's part of what is actually happening. But also in terms of the key points where your depots actually need to be also reflects the number of buses that you actually have as well. So National Express, as an example, operates around 1,200 buses. More so across the wider West Midlands, but in Birmingham itself we have lots of other bus operators as well. So there's quite a number of buses operating. At night, when you park your buses up, you've got around 500 per depot, all scrunched in together. Starting to look at new requirements for refuelling, whether it's electric or whether it's hydrogen, you need new operational arrangements of how your depots are actually set out. So you need bigger land areas, and that's actually on the outside of the city. And then doing that then impacts where do you refuel. So it all starts again, and that has to be aligned with where your routes actually are. So for your bigger operators, they are north, south, east, west actually of the city on the outside, so they've got easy access to where they're actually running the routes, but equally that their drivers are actually able to get to their place of work, to be able to take those buses out, from 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning as well. So there are lots of factors there, of which refuelling is one of them.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sylvia. There's obviously a lot to learn in terms of the operational aspects. It's learning by doing. I think we've got time for one more question. Mike, over this side. Yep.
Michael Lee from Alstom. I was so enthused or wanting to counter the previous question. I got my hand up and then Sylvia gave a fantastic answer. But what I would say is the question ought to be, are you putting on more services? Because what you're now offering is a means of decarbonising journeys. And that's what all of this is about. It's not about decarbonising buses or trains or cars, whatever. It's the journeys that we make. We need them to be locally shifted. We can now, with your buses, you can offer people a way of making a zero carbon journey. Does that not necessitate more buses rather than less?
And that's why the city is putting huge amounts of investment in reallocating road space actually to buses, prioritising buses, introducing rapid transit buses as well. So for a city like Birmingham, it has been very difficult to get from the north of the city to the south of the city. You'd have to go to the city centre, go somewhere else to get another bus to then continue your journey. So it is revising how we do get around the city. There's also the introduction of the metro as well as part of that. So absolutely right, we are increasing services through different modes of public transport.
Thank you very much, Susie. That's a really good transport, Mike. Thank you, appreciate that. So if we just put our hands together for the panelists.